G'day everyone. I just saw an article actually on DPReview talking about the Nikon Z7, and I thought I'd have a discussion with you because I'd love to know your opinions. Now I know a lot of the Nikon fanboys may not like some of the things that I say, but I want this to be an open discussion about whether you think the Nikon Z7 is a good first release. I think in some ways, if the Sony had put that out as their first release, they may have got really bagged, and it's interesting to see how it changes when Nikon have a first release camera. Let's look down at this article that I just saw first off. I think it was Sony Alpha Rumors talking about the actual article itself, and I'll go to another page in a minute. But they're talking about the overall, the a7R III will likely be a more capable option for most users out there. And basically, I'll put the link down to the DPReview below, but this is the things that I wanted to actually talk to you about, was that a few of the things that I noticed, and I've been looking at a number of reviews. Yes, I haven't got the camera, and there's going to be people say you shouldn't be talking about cameras until you reviewed it. But you can go by what other people are reviewing it. There's enough reviews out there now to show what the camera's actually like. Tony Northrup recently just did a video about it, showing the images, and it looked like it was almost identical to the a7R III in the sensor. So I've got a feeling the sensors are probably almost the same, and he discussed that as well. As you know, a lot of the Nikon's cameras did use Sony. That's why when I moved from Nikon to Sony, no one noticed any difference in the look of my images, because they were Sony sensors anyway being used in the Nikon cameras that I was using at the time. But you know, like I said, if you look at the images, they do look very similar side by side, but it's some of the flaws in the camera that really, for me, probably aren't good enough, in the fact that and I'll go through some of these things in a minute, that in the fact that it does struggle very badly in low light. It's only rated at -1, but according to the reviews, even what DPR said, it actually even struggles to get anything even around that area working very well, particularly if you're dealing with continuous focus and face detect. It works very badly. So that's one real bad point about the camera. When you think the a7R III can focus down to -3, I think with a 1.4 lens, it's -4. The low light focus now on the Sony cameras is excellent. Few other things that it misses as well is obviously it has no IAF that the Sony cameras work so well with, and there's also, for some reason, they didn't include the 3D tracking modes that the other Nikon cameras have, and I don't understand why they never included those sort of features. Clearly, I think they're trying to protect what the other, the D850, for instance, which I think is a really silly thing to do. Holding those sort of things back is really bad. And one of the main things I think they've held back, obviously, is to only include the one card slot, which I think for a camera priced at that range is a really terrible thing to do. I know people say you don't need a second card slot, but I believe you do if you're working for any professional type job where the job can't be reshot. And there's some of the things that are really interesting about this. So it's more the gap in image quality. I think basically they're comparable, and if you read this article, you'll see that the Nikon Z7 is very comparable to what the a7R III has, because I think they're the same sensor. Some good things, obviously, the mount is a great mount, but then they've stopped third-party manufacturers from accessing that mount. So what's now going to happen is they're going to have to reverse engineer, and reverse engineered lenses never work as well at all, or reverse engineered adapters never work as well as if it's been a native adapter. So that does cause issues, and I think they're being very short-sighted in that and just protecting their lenses, unlike, say, Nikon or Panasonic and others that have allowed the mount to be left open, which does allow the camera to sell more, because you can also then get more lenses from other manufacturers that are actually out there. So let's also look at this, because it's interesting too if we look at the conclusion, what DPR have said. Now, obviously, the ergonomics is very good on this camera, and a lot of people do like that larger feel, like what they're offering there. And it did get recently mentioned that they, I think from one of the sites that had pulled the camera apart, said it was probably one of the best built mirrorless cameras in the marketplace. So they have got that down pat, but it's other things that are obviously lacking. It does have 10-bit 4K footage, which is great. That's one thing that obviously you can't get in the Sony. It would have probably definitely better weather sealing. The top plate, if you like that, is good if you want that display there, and a better familiar menu if you're coming over from that side. And it also does have a highly detailed EVF. It does have embodied stabilization, so it definitely beats the Canon in that regard. But it's more the things that they don't like, which it's saying the AF system hunts in low light due to limited sensitivity. Face detection is less reliable than the competition. AF tracking, and they're saying that all along, is less reliable than the competition, and I don't know why Nikon have held that back from their other cameras, because when I had the D4S, the 3D tracking was amazing in tracking moving subjects and things like that. It says AF tracking is cumbersome to engage. Touchscreen can not be used for the touchpad AF when using the EVF. Significant rolling shutter in full frame. No live feed, so the feed through the EVF is not very good, and they're saying at 5.5 frames per second, it suffers from a significant drop in the EVF. Inconsistent metering. On sensor, AF causes banding. Well, a lot of the other cameras that are out in the mirrorless, particularly with the AF, causes banding. So I think that's overall. And I just wanted to see if there was anything else. Battery life is on the short side, and obviously a single card slot is a really bad thing as well. But what I wanted to show you was actually this, and this is the interesting thing in the conclusion. They're comparing the camera to its peers, and they're actually saying down here that the most obvious and direct comparison on the mirrorless side is the Sony a7R III. Other cameras we hold, another camera we hold in extremely high esteem. And while the similarities between these two cameras are remarkable, spec for spec, and they nearly mirror one another. But the Sony is a third generation product, while the Nikon is a first, and it shows. While there are things we prefer about the Nikon, like more sensible menus, better operational responsiveness, and a more comfortable grip, in terms of raw performance, the a7R III manages at least to match it in everything from raw dynamic range to video quality to AF reliability. We also love Sony's IAF. These differences aren't huge, but overall the a7R III will likely be the more capable option for most users. It does then compare it to the eos-r, and it says that it's a better camera than the eos-r. And this is the interesting thing, because I don't really think we should be saying that this is Nikon have been in the market for a long, long time. They've also been producing mirrorless cameras for a long time as well. And that's what I think DPR have forgotten here, that aspect of it. Like I said, I think they're giving them a little bit more slack than what they should be getting, because Nikon have been able to see what's been out there for an awful long time. And when you think about it, the a7R III was released quite a while ago now, and the Nikon Z7 has not beaten it. So that's one really interesting thing that I wanted to talk to you about in this respect. And in some ways, it's a lot worse, like no IAF, for instance. And that's one really big thing that the Sonys have over what the Nikon has. Better, really much better tracking if you're dealing with moving subjects. So if you're dealing with continuous tracking of moving subjects, the a7R III is going to be way better than what the Nikon Z7 is. Also, the fact that the low light focusing on the Z7 is not good, and that's been proven by a number of people, and that's really interesting as well, that you're only dealing with -1, and DPReview said that even then it struggled at that sort of level. Face Detect particularly was struggling, and anything with continuous autofocus really struggled. So that's another area where it has been let down, say, compared to Sony as well. And then the other thing is obviously talking about the actual dual card slots. The Sonys now have dual card slots. They got slaughtered when they first released their cameras, and now that Nikon have got one, no one seems to want to mention that much at all. And so it's really interesting. The people that were bagging Sony now have shut up about that, because Nikon have released one like that, and now all of a sudden everyone's saying you don't need dual card slots. So it's really interesting. So what I would like people to know is to think, how good is the Sony a7R III really, when you think that's been out for so long? And it still is comparable to something that has just been released, and it's Nikon's flagship model that they may not release now for another 2 to 3 years, whereas probably Sony will release a new a7R IV next year, and who knows what that will be. But what do you think about the things I've just been talking about? Do you really think that Nikon should have done better? Have they held back from and protected their D850. I just think overall that we're very lucky that Sony have given us such an amazing camera, and like I said, that's been out for a while now, and it still is up there with anything, and in fact is often better than the other cameras that are out there. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you all again soon for the next video. Bye for now.